and thank you for tuning in to this latest exclusive Edie video interview here from the ground at COP26. After another action-packed day, we're back in the action zone next to the action hub. Count how many times I say action. After a jam-packed Energy Day here in Glasgow, and I'm delighted to be joined by Helen Clarkson, the Chief Executive of the Climate Group this afternoon. Helen, welcome, thank you so much for your time. As I've said, another busy day here, and I understand your first full day on site at the Blue Zone. So what have your reflections been? What have been your highlights and your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're starting to see some movement. We're seeing some interesting commitments. I think always at COP you sort of get given with one hand and then it gets taken away with the other. So it's interesting to see, for example, this announcement on coal. It's got some really significant things in there. We've got countries that we haven't heard a lot from. So Poland, Vietnam, Chile. These are really important countries to hear making these commitments. At the same time, disappointment that sort of US, Australia, China aren't there. So it's really good to see progress. I think always with these things, getting that first commitment out there is critical, and then you hope to get things to happen quicker than people have said.
And as you say, a lot of momentum from governments here, but obviously the non-state actors are starting to come to the fore as well, with the World Leaders Summit part of the event now closed. So you mentioned the coal phase out there. What can businesses do to harness that momentum and help accelerate the clean energy transition in the places that they operate?
Yeah, so we run something called the RE100 campaign, which is a commitment to 100% renewable electricity, and that's a very positive commitment to renewable electricity. Then you get the businesses saying, okay, well now we need to go and procure it, and you start to see how the policy, particularly in Asia, which is a big focus of the campaign, is quite pro-fossil fuels and not very helpful for renewable energy. So what we do then with the businesses is bring them together and work on what are the policy levers that we can pull as a group by harnessing the collective action of those businesses to actually move things. So for example, this year in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, we've been doing different things in order to push on the government and say, look, actually the policy regime here at the moment favours fossil fuels. You've got all these businesses who are committed to renewable energy. How do we change markets so they can actually start to procure the renewable energy that they want?
And obviously it's not just the businesses that need to procure renewable energy. There'll be communities that they serve and they need access to this as well to ensure that fair and just transition. So you've mentioned some issues with procurement but also great strides there. Do you think the next step is going to be about access for communities and workers and the places that the businesses serve, and if so, what can businesses do here?
Yeah, I think this is a big issue. You know, we can see what happens when you sort of rip too quickly out of one energy system into another, and these things take time, and one thing we know we don't have is time. So we've got to get quite thoughtful about how we make this transition, and again I think that's where interaction between business and policymakers is going to be critical to understand what does it mean to have a just transition, how do we ensure customers and people who work in those industries are being fairly treated.
Fantastic. And you mentioned at the beginning that at COP sometimes it can feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or even the other way around. And as you said, some great announcements today, some people more optimistic than they were at the start of the week. I'll probably include myself in that. Others saying that ultimately this might be a cop-out. So I'd like to get your thoughts on whether you're thinking that this will be a good or a bad COP, and what you're looking for over the coming days, because we're about coming towards the end of the first week here in Glasgow.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with COP that people always say is kind of these cliches, like it's often hard when you're here to kind of take on it. You get more when you're outside or out of the room and you're reflecting. It's difficult because they've got this 2 weeks where they need to make real progress. So much attention focused on it. It's like feel high pressure. Actually, we're seeing a lot that's good. We've got these long-term commitments. You're hearing from countries like India finally announcing a date. Okay, the date isn't what people are hoping, but what we've seen elsewhere in the world is that when dates are announced, we get there a lot quicker, and a lot of it is about signalling to markets and then starting to make the plans. We've seen how these things move quickly. So really important, India is at the table. I think that's great. What we want to see with all these commitments, whether they're 2030 or 2050, is, okay, what are the plans that deliver against those? That's the work for after COP. So we need to get everything as far as we can in these 2 weeks, but then the hard work of okay, how do you deliver on it? So I think it's sort of premature. There's been a lot of this is this one moment. I think there's always much pressure for one moment. We've seen a lot that's good, and I think then it's our job, working with non-state actors and as activists to say, right, what are the plans? How are we delivering on it? How do we make sure that we don't have this thing that we've had in the past, for example, on commitments to financing, which never then materialises, because we need the plans, and that's a really critical work of the years to come. So it's never just about 2 weeks, it's always about the year-round work, and we know it's really hard work for this decade.
Of course, and I think that's a really nice note to end on. The action doesn't end here at COP26, and neither should the momentum. Helen, I appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, so I'm going to wrap things up now. And thank you to everyone watching this at home. If you've enjoyed our discussion, we are bringing these to you live from the ground at COP26 throughout. There's a bank of these videos already on our website, edie.net, and we'll be bringing to you more exclusive chats in the coming days. But for now, it's a goodbye from myself and from Helen. Thank you.